This video is Patreon funded with an extra special thanks to Chris Locke. Check out my weekly guided practice routines in the description below. Hi everybody, Levi Clay here, and I'm back again for another week to talk about the subject of practice. And in a follow-up to last week, because that was always the idea, to do two videos, one saying why you shouldn't do something and one saying why you should do something, keeping a sense of balance, we're going to be coming back to the subject of scales. Now, last week I said to you the reason that you should absolutely never practice scales, and if you want to go and check that out, head on over to my channel. I'm sure you will find it. Shouldn't be too difficult for you. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why you absolutely should learn your scales. It's definitely, I think, something that's very important. In fact, if you were to check out my weekly guided practice routines over on Patreon, link in the description, we're actually starting to deal, just in a slight way, starting to deal with the concept of scales and trying to break out of the traditional way of practicing scales, making things a lot more musical, but you get the idea. Now, as I say, the idea was always to do a two-part, always to talk about why you should do something and then why you shouldn't do something. And some of you guys absolutely got that. I had some great comments on YouTube from people talking about the reasons why you should absolutely learn your scales. And I also had some people that really missed the point. And I think this is something that's definitely worth considering when you're talking about a subject like this. I'm putting out videos here just to give you something to think about. There's nothing more intended here. I'm not telling you how to live your life. It really is as simple as that. These ideas, especially where I don't have a guitar, where I'm talking about educational ideas, these are merely ideas that I'm putting out there, and discussion is always encouraged in that field. I want discussion. I think is a great way to help move things forward. So this is all about just giving you something to think about. I want you to think about the ideas that I talked about in that last video, and the same with all of these practice videos where I'm talking about the subject of, the Holy Trinity of practice. The ideas here are always about getting some thought going. And what I noticed is some people absolutely took that and really got that and got a lot of value out of that video. Some people listened to what I had to say and said, you know what, that's really resonated with me. It's kind of changed my perspective on things. And I love hearing that. I love hearing that people change their mind about things. Some people disagreed with me, and of course that's absolutely fine too. But some people kind of demonstrated that thing that you get in the console space where you feel the need to fight for your brand. So there were some people that were upset by the video, and I have to urge you just to go back and think about this. If your reaction to something like that is to be upset by what I'm talking about, maybe what you're doing is going into a defense mechanism where you're trying to protect your investment, the time that you've invested into something. If you disagree with that, again, absolutely fine. But there's no reason that anything I say in these videos should really upset you. You either agree or you disagree. Definitely not a reason to be upset. I wanted to actually read one of those comments for you now on YouTube. This is a really positive one, addressing some of the reasons why scales might be a good thing for you to be working on. So let's take a look at it.
Hey Levi, it's Levi. My name's right there in the channel. Just kidding. Good video. I agree with the suggestions you made, but I think there's some misleading trends to the whole don't practice scales thing. It always seems to come from people who have already done the job. Scales don't just help with dexterity. They are very useful to map out the geography of the fretboard and help locating things faster and think faster as well. If one has already done the job, I totally agree that he or she should go on to some next level, which can be breaking up scales as you did, even though I'd say that practicing scales as well. Many other concepts can be applied, some basic voice leading, for example, and the use of passing tones, both diatonic and chromatic. But if you're not able to play any scale in any key, whatever place on the fretboard, then I'd say that practicing that is not time lost. There are many ways to practice scale in a more musical way if you find it boring to go up and down. Also, as many already said in your comments, you can do that and other things at the same time. That said, I appreciate your approach to this topic, not as clickbaity and full of hype as the funny ads that I get. God, I hate those kind of ads, especially when they start with, bro, goddamn ads.
So thank you so much for that comment, and I agree with everything you're saying there. I've been very, very particular about the words that I've used, and we're going to come back to the idea of language as part of this video. I said that you should never practice scales, and you might feel that this is a bit of a cop-out. If you look at the title of this video, the title of this video isn't why you should practice scales. The title of this video is why you should absolutely learn your scales. Because I guess the point that I'm getting at here is understanding the distinction between learning something and practicing something. Practice is what you do in order to get to the stage where you have learned something. Learning and having learned something, that's something that I think is very much an objective yes or no. You either have learned something or you have not learned something. If you have learned the thing, then you're not in a place where you need to practice it anymore. The examples I like to give, I can drive a car. I don't wake up in the morning and practice driving my car before driving my car. Using more analogies that I used in the last video. I can speak English. I don't wake up in the morning and practice the alphabet. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have to learn how to drive a car, and that doesn't mean that I didn't have to learn how to speak English. you should absolutely consider learning your scales, because for all of the points raised there, those are all absolutely valid. Learning your scales makes you a more musically literate person. Understanding the notes that you find within a key, and I really do mean notes here rather than talking physical shapes on the fretboard. Using that, understanding that is just a wonderful way of being able to piece music together and understand music in a much higher level of competency. Knowing that when you look at a chord name on a chart, if you see an A flat major 7, actually knowing what notes are in an A flat major 7, knowing the difference between an A flat major 7 and an A flat major 7 sharp 5, and being able to make those adjustments on the fly comes from your knowledge of keys. It comes from your knowledge of scales. So I absolutely think that learning your scales is something that is worthy of your time. The point of the last video was pointing out that when you get to the point where you have learned them, don't keep using that time to keep practicing something that you have learned. And again, really important to understand this idea of that objective standard. You either have learned something or you have not learned something. You're in that position. And if you're practicing something, it should be because you haven't fully learned the thing. But once you've got to that place where you know the thing, then you shouldn't need to practice it anymore. You simply shouldn't need to practice it anymore. That time is so much better used on other things, and I talked about that in the last video. I think developing your ear is a wonderful use of your time. Playing through something that you know incredibly well already is you wasting your time. I'm doing weekly guided ear training sessions on my Patreon page now as well, and I think that is a much better use of your time than playing through something that you've done many times before. You know, I mentioned in the last video, I'm practicing my scales religiously at the moment on the piano, and that's both hands, 4 octaves, up and down, 12 keys. I'm putting all of my time into that, so I don't think that practicing scales is a bad use of your time. I'm doing it because I haven't learned them yet. I haven't truly mastered them. So understanding that difference, that's really the point of this video, the difference between things you practice and things you have learned, and then really asking the question, do you think that you should be devoting time in your practice routine? Because we all have a limited amount of time. Do you think that doing that puts you in a position where you are wasting some of your time? Would your time be better spent elsewhere? I'm going to give you one more thing to kind of consider, just to show you how some of this stuff can bite you in the ass. So I talk about never practicing scales and saying, from my perspective, I never have an interest in just playing a scale. I never want to play a scale and just play a straight scale. I always want something to be a little bit more interesting. So I did a gig at the weekend. We played a sold-out show at the Roxy in Edinburgh, the Assembly Hall in Edinburgh. And it was my first time playing with a band, and we played some original material in there. And at the end of one of the tunes, a kind of up-tempo, kind of New Orleans jazz vibe type thing, the final lick that the guitar played felt a little bit out of place from the rest of the track. And it was a really fast, at least from my perspective, descending pentatonic scale with blues notes. I won't give up on nothing particularly outrageous being played in terms of the contour of the line. It was just a descending scale played with a triplet feel. And up to the gig, I hadn't played that lick that way because I thought I'm going to play something that I want to play there. But when we rehearsed, the drummer said it would be really much more helpful if you played the lick more like it was on the record. And I went, whoo, okay, that's a fast descending scale. And fortunately, because I have practiced things to the point that I've learned them, both technique, alternate picking technique, and the physical scale, knowing the scale, that was something that I was able to put in place almost immediately. If I hadn't learned these things, if I couldn't just hear that record and immediately go, well, I know exactly what that is, and I know how I would play that on the instrument, I would have been in trouble. This was, a couple of hours before the gig. If I needed to go home and learn something before the gig, I would have been in a lot of trouble. So knowing these things, really understanding and being able to pull these things off is absolutely a benefit to you. But you won't have those skills. You won't have the skills to hear something on a record and go, I know what that is, I know how to play that, or hear a song for the first time and go, I know what that chord progression is, I'm going to be able to play that, I'm going to be able to work that out on my instrument. You won't be able to develop any of those skills if you devote too much of your time to things that you already know. So, if you know your scales, and I really truly do mean know them, if you've learned them, let's start using our practice time more efficiently. If you don't know your scales yet, if there are things, any part of your practice, any part of your playing that you don't know, truly know, then it should still be part of your practice routine. But let's get those things to the point where you know them, you've mastered them, and you're able to move on to other things. Right. Let's just head on over and click this incredible list of people that support the channel via Patreon. Most of these guys are now active on the weekly guided practice routines. Link in the description if you want to get involved in these practice routines. There's a new one up obviously today, and an ear training video will be going up tomorrow. They are so much fun. I'm having a blast putting these together, giving myself a lot of challenges in these as well as giving you guys lots of challenges. So please do consider checking it out. It's a great way to support the channel. And if that doesn't suit, you can also head on over to Amazon, check out one of my books. I have many available. I'm sure you will find one you like. Thank you so much for checking this video out, guys. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please do let me know in that comment section below. Such great fun getting involved with you guys last week, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. Thanks so much, and I will see you for another video soon. Laters.